This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything, gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. This week in the studio, one punch, a tragic death, and a 6-year legal battle that nearly destroyed 3 decorated special operators. This is the story of the Marsoc 3. Gunnery Sergeants Daniel Dreyer and Josh Negron, and Navy Chief Eric Gilmet, from a New Year's Eve in Iraq to the courtroom, the fight for their honor, and the final vindication that shook the military justice system. Please welcome into the studio, Eric Gilmet. What's going on, my friend?
Nothing much, man. How you doing today?
Man, I'm glad you're here. This has been a while coming, and phone calls back and forth, and I'm glad we get to finally talk about this.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I want to start off with the one thing that you and I talked about, that, you know, this is how you've said that a lot of people remember you when they say, oh, you're part of the Marsoc 3. They don't remember that this is just the last part of your career. You were a very decorated sailor, soldier, however you want to put it, throughout your whole career. And, you know, it ends on this sour note. So I'm glad that you get to explain your story. I'm glad you get to explain your side, because there was a lot of stuff done to you at the end of your career that makes for a lot of bad memories.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I know we've talked about it. It kind of hurts you, you know, when people refer to you like, oh, you're one of the Marsoc 3. It's like, hey, no, I'm Eric, and I was in the Navy, and I'm a father, I'm a husband. Like, that's not what I am. It was, a fraction of my military time, and a lot of that's forgotten on people.
So, when you look back on your career and you look back at the end of your career, is there anything that right at the end that you would change?
Man, we're starting off immediately with the deep questions.
Well, not necessarily. I think it's going to tie in later on, because we're going to jump back in. But I just want to set this up at the very beginning, like I told you about on the phone.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would change right at the end of your career, other than, of course, the obvious? Is there some little step that you would change?
No, there isn't. Even, yeah, I know it might seem strange, but even the legal stuff, I wouldn't change it. Because the bottom line is we all have a path that's set out before us before we're even born, right? And this was just the path that I was supposed to go on. So, is it unfortunate what happened? Absolutely. Did I enjoy any part of it? No. But at the same time, I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in today, being retired and getting to live this great life, without what happened. So, I don't think I have a right to be upset about that. So I'm happy with how everything's gone in my life.
It's a positive way to look at it. All right, let's get away from the deep questions. Let's go back to the very beginning, like we always do. Let's talk about your childhood. What influenced you into this life of service? Because not only are you in the Navy and a corpsman, but you take the rough route, because there's a different way that you could have gone as a corpsman. You could have worked in hospitals, whatever, but you decided to take the adventurous route. So let's talk about your childhood and what kind of pushed you into this life.
Yeah, so grew up in Michigan, in a small town, just a normal life, nothing crazy. Went to a small school. I graduated with about, 120 kids. And I'd gotten accepted into Western Michigan University, but didn't I didn't think that it was the right thing for me to do. And also during my senior year, September 11th happened. But that really wasn't a driving factor for me. The driving factor for me was the fact that I didn't really know what my life entailed, like what the plan was. And Navy recruiter was at the high school one day, and I started talking to him, and I think this was around March. I was already 18, and um, went over to the recruiting station in Lansing and signed up to be a medic. And I signed up to be a corpsman because I wanted to be a doctor at some point. And me and him had talked about, hey, you can use the GI Bill and get an education and all that stuff. And came home and told my parents, hey, I joined the Navy. And then September of 2002, I left, and I went into it not knowing really anything about the military until, or anything about being corpsman working with Marines until I was in basic training, and our division commander, which are our drill instructors essentially, um, had asked the group, hey, who's going to be a corpsman, and a bunch of us raised our hand, and then he said, how many of you are going to go work with Marines? And I said, what's that like? And he said, it's a living hell. And that, that piqued my interest. So I was like, damn, that sounds kind of cool. I did feel I did have something to prove as a kid because, I don't think, when I was growing up, I always felt like my dad didn't really approve of what I was doing as a kid. So I felt like this was a chance to prove myself. And, um, after the basic corpsman school, I went to field medical service school in Camp Lejeune, where all uh, uh, corpsmen that are going to go work with the Marines have to attend that school. And after I completed that, I went to a Marine infantry unit. I went to 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, and spent 3 years in a line company. And that kind of, once I started working with Marines, I never stopped. I spent my entire career in some capacity working alongside Marines or supporting them.
Let's talk about your father real quick. I want you to explain a little bit what you mean by you didn't think that he approved of the things that you did.
Um, Maybe not necessarily the things that I did, but I never felt that my dad was proud of me. Right? I didn't play sports in school. I played hockey when I was a kid, but when I was 13, I had a couple injuries and I stopped playing. And I think me and my dad had a temper, right? And I always just felt like I never made him happy, right? And we had our differences, but everything changed after I joined. Me and my dad are best friends now. I talk to that man every day. So, in a way, it was, and he acknowledges the fact that he had a temper, and it was, he was really hard on me. I was his only son. So, um, that's what I mean by that.
Do you think that did you ever look back on that? Once you join, once you get going, now your relationship is flourishing. Did that ever kind of solidify that response to you to go into the military?
Yeah, it did. And to be honest, I was actually, I knew the choice was right when I actually left. The day I left for basic training, my dad hugged me and he cried, you know, and I was like, damn, like, it kind of, it was nice to see that. Um, so yeah, from then I knew I'd made the right choice, and our relationship's been really good.
Why do you think you chose? I know being a doctor later on, but what was it about the medical position that really kind of thrust you into it?
My mom has a little bit of, not a little bit. She spent her time in the medical field. She's been an asthma care specialist. Even until now, she still works a little bit in that capacity in her 60s. So, um, that's what kind of piqued my interest.
When you go in and you go over to the Marines, let's talk about when you get there, you make it through because it's a lot of additional training for you to do what you did as a corpsman. When you get over there with the Marines, what are your thoughts on it? You're completely kind of separated away from the Navy now. You're not living the
No,
normal Navy life. Let's talk about how you feel once you get over there and you start working with them.
I I I immediately felt happy. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed what they were doing. you know, kind of touching back on my dad, he was a really strict disciplinarian growing up. And so, working alongside Marines, I mean, they breathe discipline. So it was kind of an easy fit for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the brotherhood. It was eye opening for sure, but it was nice to be around, like minded people that wanted to be there. And that continued to progress, obviously, from my time in the infantry, and even I saw that even more so when I went into special operations.
Now, did you ever deploy into a combat area when you weren't with Marsoc, when you were regular line infantry?
Yeah, I did 3 deployments when I was there for my 3 years, and 2 of them were to we were in Baghdad. We did embassy duty there, and then I went to Saklawiya, Iraq. That's just north of Fallujah. Actually, part of the battalion. I think a couple companies were actually in the city, and then we were in Saklawiya. It was close enough to when we stood on our building, you could see the city from there.
Right.
Yeah.
I always ask of everybody that comes on the show, the first time you get over there, the first time you're working in this job that you've worked very hard to achieve, what are your feelings as you're coming into that combat zone? Sights, sounds, smells, emotions. What are you feeling?
Um, and you feel I would feel nervous, right? It's a new spot, and you don't know what to expect really. But you train for these things, right? So, and within that training, I would definitely say there's a yearning to do the job, right? It's like, I'm doing all this training. I want to go do this. I want to fight for my country. I want to, fight alongside my brothers. So, um, there's some nerves with it, but then there's excitement with it, and the fact that you're finally able to do what you're trained to do.
The first time that you're out on a patrol, or the first time you actually put that medical into use the way it was trained to you,
Hmm.
do you remember that?
Yeah, there were a couple instances on that Iraq deployment that I had to do that. Yeah.
Let's talk about that first one. And the reason I want to talk about the first one is because I think this kind of maybe will set you down that path of where you not only stick around the infantry, but you go to Marsoc.
Yeah, we were, back then, that's, was it 2005? So, we're still in those up armored Humvees, but the top is open on the back, right? And, obviously, as times change and the battle, the battles changed, you had more up armored vehicles and such. Well, we were, our platoon was going to get inserted, or the squad had, I can't remember the destination, but somewhere in the patrol back to our base, uh, and we struck a small IED, and one of the guys got hurt, not severely, but he got some shrapnel to the face, and nothing life threatening. But I had to treat the guy, and that was my first experience doing that, and I really loved doing that. I really loved being the medic, and the guy that everybody looked to help them if the situation got bad.
I think that's a good thing, but I think it can also lead to something where you kind of live a constant life of you can't let these guys down because you are kind of the final, on their worst day, you're kind of that final meeting, and it can go either way on you. Did you ever develop kind of that idea where, it's a very heavy bag to carry around with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, especially when you get into the special operations side of it, because I know for me, and I'm sure a lot of other guys felt this. My biggest fear was letting down my teammates. Like, the thought of that was frightening. So, but you use that, right? You use that to make sure you're prepared, mentally and physically, to do your job when called upon.
You think in those first three deployments that you changed as a person?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You grow. Yeah, and you get more mature, and it was, yeah, you do for sure.
So let's flip that coin. Do you think there's anything, because you talk about mature, you talk about the positive aspects. Are there negative ones too?
Of that stress you're talking about,
No,
or
of the change that you see yourself becoming.
Uh, yeah, there can definitely be negative sides to it. I think a lot of guys get caught up in that life, right? In that drive, in that excitement they had within special operations, and then I think that can carry over to when they are back home or even when they get out of the military, which can lead to bigger problems. And what I mean by that is, um, in my opinion, I think a lot of guys when they get out, they go through the PTSD and they're upset with life because in their mind, like when they were in special forces, that was the best it was ever going to be for them. Like, how could it be any better, right? But the truth is it's just a small part of your life. Like you still have more life to live.
Well, how long is it before you travel over into the special operations arena?
So yeah, I did those first 3 years in the infantry,
Right.
and then I spent a couple years at a clinic supporting on Camp Lejeune, supporting the Marine Combat Engineer School. Um, and then I was actually going to get out of the Navy. I had gone through SEPs and TAPS and started my VA claim and all the stuff associated with that. And um, I had known about the recon corpsman community, and I'm kind of getting ready to get out. And I'm thinking, shit, like I don't want to leave. I want to try this. Like I want to be 80 years old sitting on my front porch and thinking back, man, I wish I would have done that. Right. So I talked to my wife, and we didn't even have kids at the time. And I said, hey, I really want to do this. Can I do this? And she said, yes, I will support you in this career change. Um, and then I didn't, so I was, I guess you could say kind of late going into it. You know, I was an E5 at the time and 24 years old. And a lot of guys that go through the recon corpsman pipeline are, you know, brand new corpsmen to the Navy. So, um, yeah, I did it a little later on.
Well, it's interesting though how you put it that you're getting ready to get out and then you decide you want to go the most extreme route. And those decisions are so polar opposite of each other, getting out, moving on with your life, or going the roughest route that you can. I got to understand how you kind of even put that together because you say you don't want to be old and think about it and not have done it in your life. But it seems like an extreme measure in the middle of getting out.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, you know, part of me was just thinking, you know, I haven't done everything I should be have done in the military. Like it's just there's something else I need to accomplish. And you know what greater things can you accomplish besides, you know, going to special operations, right? You know, you're talking, you know, 1% of 1% of the population, right? You know, what does it say? Like 1% of the population joins the military. Well, of that 1%, you know, you got 1% that maybe go to special forces. So, yeah, it's interesting you said that because I've never really thought about it like that. It was just I don't know, like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a corpsman in the Navy. Like I really loved it. And um, what better place to try to prove yourself and your medical skills than being, you know, one of the best medics in the military.
Well, do you think there was like a touch point, something that happened? Because, like I said, that's so extreme. I mean, you were really close to the end of the process of getting out. Do you think that there was something that happened that you said, oh, wow, maybe that's not the right decision?
Um, One thing that's coming to mind is I remember the house we were living at, um, off base in that little subdivision. There were a lot of guys that were recon or Marsoc that lived in this neighborhood, to include the guy that a neighbor that lived kind of kitty corner to me. Um, he he had a bunch of buddies over one day and their families and they're joking up. They got their recon shirts on or whatever, and I remember looking at that thinking like I want to be a part of something like that. And
Do,
that's probably one of the other factors too.
did you not feel that when you were doing 3 combat tours with the line infantry? I mean, it's an honest question to ask because there could be a brotherhood, but there's definitely maybe a tighter one in that community.
Yeah, I mean, there's tight brotherhoods in all of them, right? You know, especially the infantry, right? Like those guys, you know, being a grunt, if you're not a grunt, you're a pogue, right?
Right.
So, um, no, there was a brotherhood there, but at the same time, when I went through that stuff, I was young. I left the infantry when I was 21 years old. So, um, it wasn't. I don't know. I felt it, but I didn't feel it as strongly as I did being in special operations. And another thing too that happened is um, my platoon sergeant from my time in 2-6, uh, he became a father figure to me and a mentor and one of my best friends. And when he left to go do something else, it was, I know for me, I was kind of like, well, shit, like Travis is gone, and um, I was getting ready to go too, and it just kind of, I guess you could say, kind of vanished into the sunset right as I left. And I still keep in touch. I got my good buddy Chris that lives in New York State. Me and him stay in touch, but yeah, it definitely isn't the same as when I went to Marsoc.
So let me ask you, when you look back on it now with age, with time and everything behind you, do you think maybe you didn't appreciate it fully?
Uh, no, no, I wouldn't say that. I definitely appreciate it. I appreciated it a great deal to where, um, you know, I, I don't think without my time in the infantry, I even go into special operations.
Okay.
Like it laid the groundwork to appreciate what I had accomplished to be where I was at, right? And every day I was, because it's a drastic change, right? From, you're in the infantry and, you go to a range and everybody lines up, take your turn, and everybody's, you got double checking and rechecking your weapons and like being treated like children almost, right? To where my very first training evolution with my team, we're on the range and you have all these different setups. You got your square bay for your M4 and pistol. You got a grenade range, long guns, machine guns. I'm like bouncing around to each thing, like I'm shooting my M4, I'm clearing myself, and then going and jumping on a machine gun, and then doing the same down the line, and nobody's watching me like a hawk, right? So
Right.
I remember going through that. I was like, man, I really appreciate what I have now, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to have that level of appreciation without the infantry.
That's definitely a good way to put it, because I think at that point in your career, when you go over to special operations, just like if you do anything specialized in law enforcement or whatever, you're treated differently than the regular foot soldier, is what I would say.
Yes.
I mean, they understand you're an adult, you're doing an adult job. It's time to treat you like an adult.
Yeah.
I do want to ask though, how you talk about you were shooting all the different weapons and stuff, how you mix the two together. You're a medic. Your job is to save lives and all of that kind of stuff. But on the opposite end of that, your job is also to get behind the trigger if you have to. How do you, throughout your entire career, how do you balance that?
Um, it's actually really easy to balance that because one thing that we are taught when we're going through our medical training is that the best way to save lives is to win the gunfight, right? So that takes priority, right? Like I'm not, like if I'm in the middle of a gunfight um with the enemy, and the guy gets shot, I can't stop what I'm doing to go help him because then I'm gonna get shot or more people are gonna get shot, right? um so that's how you're able to find that balance.
Um, when you're done with your whole career and you look back on it, uh, comparing the two, saving lives and taking lives, um, have you made complete peace with everything?
Yeah, absolutely.
The reason I asked that question is going to set up for later on, but you've made peace with all of that.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
because it's going to come in important in our main thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get to that, because I think it's going to take a while to get through all of this. So
Yeah.
January 1st, 2019, you're in Iraq. I need you to set up the situation. What's happening, and what kind of puts you guys in the situation that you're in?
So I believe it's important for people to really understand the environment we were in. Okay, it's very permissive, right? So, we were in Erbil, Iraq. Well, to the people that live there, that's considered Kurdistan, right? I mean, there's an actual definitive line where throughout the entire southern region of Kurdistan, to where on one side you have Kurdish soldiers, 100 yards away you got Iraq soldiers, right? So if you hear me say northern Iraq, if you hear me say Kurdistan, I'm talking about the same thing. But being that it's Kurds, they're very easygoing. They're not very stringent with their religious beliefs, to where they don't care that people drink. I mean, there's bars in town, there's restaurants that serve alcohol. You can go to there were liquor stores, right, selling expensive whiskeys, things like that, right? So very easygoing over there. And Erbil is a very safe city. I think it's fair to say it's safer than some of our most dangerous cities here in America by far.
That's saying a lot.
It absolutely, it 100% is safer. Like it's safer than South Chicago for sure. So, I mean, it just is like, it's not what people think. Like, if people like go over there like, oh, you're going to a war zone. Yeah, Iraq's at war, but, at the same time, you go into that city, you're not gonna, you can forget that pretty easily, actually. So we were allowed to go out in town. We would just grab one of our vehicles, say, hey, this is where we're going, sign out, and go out and, be able to enjoy town, right? But obviously, we had to go out with at least another person. And every week, me and a group of friends there that included Josh and Danny would go to a restaurant that we like to frequent and get some food and relax and have a drink sometimes. So leading up to, I think it's important to tell this as well, leading up to that night, I did not know Rick Rodriguez at all. I knew that he worked at the camp. My only interaction with him was one day I went to, him and the other contractors worked on the north end of our camp, and I walked over there to look for another contractor named Tyler, and Rick was there, and said, hey, is Tyler around? He said, no, he's at breakfast. I said, okay, cool. I'll come back later. And that was it. That's the only time I'd ever spoken to Rick before the incident. But I would see him a lot in the gym. We worked out at the same time, but I didn't go into the gym to talk to people. I walked in there to work out, and then I would leave. So, we go to the T-bar. By this time it's 2, 3 in the morning. And Rick's there with some other Marines that worked in the S4. I know they used to go there a lot. And, we walk in, we see him. I actually saw Rick. I walked up to him and said hi, Happy New Year. We shook hands. We kind of chatted for a little bit. And then I went and did my own thing. Then I went to the bar. This was near closing time. Danny and Josh, and we were talking to the owner, and Rick came up behind me, tapped me on the shoulder, got my attention, and I can't remember the entire conversation, but it caught me off guard because he had said some things that seemed very strange to me. He said, hey, I was a Green Beret and I have 5 Bronze Stars. How come you don't respect me? And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about, right? Like, I'm thinking, I don't give a shit about your background. Like, I don't care, dude. But I didn't want it to get dumb, and it could have immediately, right? So I was like, hey, man, I'm sorry you feel that way, dude. Patted him on the shoulder, and I went back to my conversation with my friends. And then as we're getting ready to leave and they're closing down, I saw Rick again. I came up to him. I said, hey, man, just want to make sure everything's cool. And he was even more irritated about the lack of, respect that I had shown him. And at this point I said, you know what, dude, fuck you. Right. He got in my face. We were yelling back and forth. The bouncers came in, grabbed him and told him to leave. And they asked us to wait for about 5 minutes. We said, sure. We waited. And then we left. And as we're walking down the street towards our vehicle, Rick is there waiting for us, most likely waiting for me with some of his friends. And Danny approached him to try to get him to relax, to calm down, and he wouldn't. And he did that, 2-finger poke to Danny's chest and kind of made this move like he was going to do something, and Danny pushed him back. And then Rick came back and took like 3 swings at him. He hit him once for sure, maybe 2 times, and then that's when Josh came in from the side and hit him and knocked him out, and the fight was over, right? Everybody was gathered around. I came up to him and saw he was unconscious. I put him on his side. It's the recovery position. It's just a good way an easy way to keep somebody's airway open. And I kind of give him a quick once over. I saw he had like a small cut in the back of his head, and I look at all the guys that are there with him. I said, "Are you gonna get him out of here? You know, we're in the middle of the street in Erbil, right?" And a bunch of them start walking away and looking at me all confused as to what should happen. I'm like, well, I guess we got to do something. So I told Danny to go get the truck, and we picked him up and put him in the back of the truck, took him back to the camp. Found that other contractor, Tyler, that I had mentioned earlier, and told him what had happened. And I said, hey, Rick's unconscious. We need to get him in his room. And he unlocked Rick's door. We put him in his bed, and I monitored Rick for the next, I don't know, 5 hours or so, staying up with him, you know, doing the checks to make sure he was okay, and he was. And at about 9:30, Tyler was with us too when I was watching him, and I told Tyler, I said, hey man, I gotta get some sleep, right? And I think I had a brief in like a few hours, and said, hey, if you know where my room's at, if there's any problems, you come get me. And went to sleep, and about an hour later, Tyler woke me up saying that Rick wasn't breathing, and I went back to Rick's room, and he was lying on the floor on his back, pale blue, obviously not breathing. Checked for a pulse. He had a faint pulse, and I look at Tyler and I said, go get help and get a truck right now. And you know, it didn't seem too long, and he came back with the doctor that was on our camp, and a truck, and we loaded him up in the truck and took him over to the hospital there on the base, which was ran by Canadians, and they took over from there. But you know, during that truck ride over there, it wasn't that far, but it was a dirt road that was really bumpy. There had been a lot of rain, so there was a lot of potholes in it, and I'm checking for a pulse. I lose a pulse, so on the way there, I'm battling between doing chest compressions. It's a small, like, Ford Ranger size truck, so he's like basically almost falling out of it. So I'm having to drag him, and this guy weighs 250 pounds, if not more. I'm trying to drag him back into the truck, me not fall out at the same time, and still do chest compressions. And then we get there, and they came out with the stretcher and took him in, and then yeah, so that's basically everything leading up to, you know, he died 4 days later, and then being charged with these crimes.
Okay, a lot to take in there.
A lot to take in.
There's a lot of questions there. So when you go to that bar, you don't know this guy. You've only talked to him once. You go up, you say Happy New Year. You guys have a conversation. Anything in that conversation that would have led to that second one?
No.
Any kind of demeanor that you had to him, dismissive of him, anything like that would have led to that second confrontation?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. So when he comes up and he says he has all these awards, that he's a Green Beret, all of these kind of things, do you think, and remember, we're talking hindsight here, if you maybe wouldn't have been, because you told him, yeah, sorry, I offended you, patted him on the shoulder, kind of moved him along the way. Yeah. If you're not as dismissive to him, then do you think that third encounter happens?
I don't know. I mean, I think the right person to ask is Rick Rodriguez, right? Because it's like, what answer was he trying to get out of me?
Right.
Right.
Well, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is why the target was you. You'd only talked to this guy once before. You're with other buddies you're working the same positions. Why it was you? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And in everything I've read, everything I've watched, there's nothing that stands out that singles you out.
DJ, that's the great mystery that'll never be answered. I've never. My only thoughts on it stem back to something that I mentioned earlier about guys having a hard time letting it go, right? So, he was a former Green Beret, and we're treated differently in special operations. So maybe maybe he thought I was some support dude that was supposed to kiss his ass or something. I don't know, right? So it's just it's a mystery. It's a mystery, and we'll never know. So,
So the next question that would happen is all of this happens, the fight, you take him to his room, you get put in his room, you monitor him. Why not take him to the hospital?
that thought was on my mind, like to take him there, but I needed I needed him to show the signs that would warrant me to take him. I'm not just some, normal field medic. I'm a provider, right? At this point in my career with my training, I have the ability to know what I'm looking for, right?
Okay.
And so my concerns with him are, okay, so he hit his head, obviously from the cut on the back of his head. Um, does he have some type of brain injury, right? Some type of bleeding going on in there. And there's multiple things you look for, right? You look for their eyes and their pupils and how they react to light. You're looking for things like I would do this thing is called a brachial pinch, right? Where you pinch somebody right here. It's pretty painful. Well, I would do that, and he was able to reach. He would reach with his right arm over to kind of stop me. He's not awake, but you can't. It's just a natural reaction for the body. So that's a big indicator. Like, okay, obviously, so when you pinch somebody here, that means the left side of the brain is what picks it up and sends a signal over to the right side of the brain to move their right arm, right? So obviously, there's nothing going on neurologically there that's causing a problem. And the guy was breathing; his vital signs were normal. At this point, and doctors confirmed this in Danny and Josh's trial. He was at a point where all you can do is watch him. That's it. And that's
Right.
something I'm qualified to do. So that's what I did.
Because I think you have to understand, and I think you do understand it in all of our talks, that when the normal person from the outside looks in, we're just talking about a civilian that looks at the story. They go, well, yeah, you were a medic. Yeah, you were highly trained, but there's doctors on the base that you're on. There's a hospital on the base that you're on. And I think that's where I wanted you to explain, because they're not understanding why that wasn't done. They're looking at someone gets a concussion in the real world, not in a combat zone. They go to the hospital. They get
Yeah.
checked out.
But what do you get at a hospital? You get a person that knows what they're doing. So take away take away the environment, take away you know, the only difference is instead of being in a hospital bed, he was in his bed.
Right.
You still have somebody with the same training, same knowledge, same tools that you would need to check this guy, and that's what I did. So, and that's the kind of environment I worked in, right?
Right.
Like I didn't take every patient I encountered to the hospital, right? I'm able to do it. Like I have a med bag, guys, that has equipment in it,
Right.
So
Let me ask you then, in saying all of that, do you regret not going to the hospital?
I know. Yeah, I've armchair quarterbacked myself, many times, and would have taken him there. Um, Not taken away the problem. I still think he probably would have maybe had these issues because he ended up choking to death on his own vomit. But would it have? Well, I don't know. Like, would it have helped us with our legal things? And I'm sitting here thinking about it. I can't definitively say it would. Let's say something happens to him in the hospital. I think maybe Danny and Josh still get charged. Would I? Probably not, right? Because now the medical stuff isn't on my hands. But again, like I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Do you think that you Monday morning quarterbacked yourself harder than anybody? Because I have a feeling in knowing you that you did.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I did. I did for a long time. You start questioning yourself. Like, did I do it? Did I do everything right? Like, should I have not left and gone to get an hour of sleep? Right? Should I? Yeah, I've thought many times, should I have done something different? But it happened how it was supposed to happen, I guess.
Now, think about this question before you answer it. We talked about balancing being able to take a life and save a life, right? When
Yeah.
this happens and you start Monday morning quarterbacking yourself, does that line start to get blurred because you start asking yourself, did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? Does it change the way you think of yourself as a lifesaver, as a person that is there to render aid?
Yeah, it did. For about 3 or 4 years, well, basically up until Danny and Josh's trial, I did question my skills and my who I was as a medic until their expert witness, who is the lead ER doctor for at Camp Lejeune Naval Hospital, was on the stand testifying and said that I had done everything right that night. But yeah, but the thing that stinks is, thinking back on it now is, that's the last patient I ever worked on was Rick Rodriguez. After that, I've never dealt with any type of medical emergency since then.
Okay.
Um,
So let me compare that to an answer that you gave before. You went into Marsoc because you said, I don't want to be 80 and look back on this and regret it. That's the last patient you ever worked on. You loved medicine before that. You've never done anything since then about there. Do you think when you're 80, you're going to look back and go, yeah, it was a fucked up situation that happened, but I strayed away from something that I maybe shouldn't have?
no, I'm not going to look back and regret, because like we talked about earlier, like this is a small glimpse of
Okay.
what my actual career was. So I
Okay.
have plenty of good things in my career to look back on and be proud of.
Well, I think I just mean further in life, like in medicine, being in the civilian world, doing medicine, becoming maybe the doctor that you had talked about before. Do you think that you're ever going to regret maybe not going through with that?
No, not at all, because this experience put my path on a different direction, and I love what I'm doing now. So
Okay.
it was for a reason.
All right. So, how long after all this happens, you take him to the hospital? He is seen, he's being attended to there. When do all the flags go up and everyone starts talking to you?
He got there at like 10:30, 11 that morning, and Josh, what was it? Around that afternoon, Josh had to go on a small mission that was just like a vehicle movement somewhere, and then he came back. And he came back, I think it was like 7, 8. I think it was dark, and the three of us got together, and we were just like, "Hey, we gotta go to the leadership and tell them what happened." You know. And so the three of us were the only ones that came forward and said, "Hey, there was a fight. We were out, and there was a fight," and told them the story, and uh, they immediately confined us to our rooms, took away our weapons, took away our phones, our computers, and said, "Hey, yeah, you can go eat and hang out in your room. That's all you can do." Um, and like I said, there were multiple people out that night.
Well,
Nobody
that
came forward and said anything except us, and they didn't even discover that those guys were even out that night until the investigator from NCIS showed up and started asking questions.
and that was my next question. You think that helped or hurt you that you guys stepped forward? Because no one else did. There's a lot of people that could explain that whole situation away right then at the beginning.
Did it help us? No. Should it have? Yes. But that just, I think, shows how fucked up the system is. So,
So if you could talk to those people right now that didn't come forward, that didn't say anything, what would you say to them?
uh, um, I don't know. I don't know. I probably wouldn't say anything. I mean, it's been so long ago that what do I have to gain by saying anything? You know, it's not going to change my life anymore. I mean, if there was one of them, if it was any of them, it'd be one of them. One of them I was friends with, and he ended up becoming basically this lying piece of shit. So I'd probably tell him, "Hey, you're a fucking coward." You know. The other guys though weren't. They were. I think they were just scared for their own careers, and they made some mistakes to where they lied.
That seems to be a theme though in the long letter that you wrote me when we very first started this, that seems to be a theme where people are scared of their careers and their rank and their importance in that world.
Mhm.
So when you say that, I think it stems to a bigger problem that you and I have talked about, and that is people are more concerned about their careers than doing the right thing.
No, absolutely. And, can I say with absolute certainty I wouldn't be one of those guys? I can't, right? Because if you're never put in that situation to where it basically comes down between you and a friend, or your career and a friend, until you're in that situation, you'll never know how you'll react, right? Everybody can say, "Oh, I'll do the right thing," but once you're in it, you don't know.
But it did come down to that with you. You could have
It did.
very easily, you rendered medical aid. You did everything that you could for your two buddies that you were there with. You took him to the hospital. You took the brunt of that. It did come down to that with you, and you didn't back away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really thought about it that way. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right about that.
I mean, that goes back to the whole hospital thing. If you would have taken him to the hospital, you could have wiped your hands of the whole situation. You could have
Yeah,
said, he got punched. We picked him up. We took him to the hospital. I'm done with it. I didn't
yeah,
punch him. I didn't touch him. I didn't do anything. But you didn't do that. You stayed around for your friends.
yeah. I guess that answers the question then. But hmm.
All right. So as they start talking to you, any red flags pop up in your thoughts as they first start talking to you? Because you know, with this NCIS investigator, and it's happened on a couple different things that we've talked about on the show with other guests, is there seems to be a investigation that sometimes takes a turn where there's an answer that is wanted, so that's the answer that's looked for.
Well, when we when we came forward and talked to the command, we went to our first line in the chain of command, which was our first sergeant, and told him. And I remember talking to Danny right after this, and I said, "Dude, this is about to get really fucking bad." And he kind of gave me this look like he didn't believe me. I'm like, "Dude, trust me, shit's about to hit the fan in a hurry," and it did. Like I said, when they could find us to our rooms, and then we knew an investigator was coming. Um, and around this time, you had some big things happening in the news with Eddie Gallagher. You had the Molly case. You had multiple things going on, right? And discipline within or lack of discipline within SOCOM was now under the microscope. So those things too. I was thinking about those, and I'm thinking we're about to get fucked.
How far removed from the Haditha case are we?
Oh, I don't know. I think that was like 2000. That was early 2000s. I think that was like really early on Iraq wars when that went down. So I think maybe 2006, something like that. In fact, my civilian lawyer, was the lead defense lawyer in the Marine Corps on those cases. So he was very familiar with those.
So this investigator gets there, starts talking to you guys. What do you do?
Nothing, because uh, after we told the command, I think it was that night. Danny's wife, Destiny, got the names of 3 civilian lawyers, and I called one of them and told him what was going on. And he said, "I'll be your lawyer." He said, uh, "Don't say another word to anybody." And I said, "Okay." And the investigator showed up. He had asked some questions to some other. He'd asked around the camp. He didn't ask me, Danny, or Josh anything. Probably because we were, at this point, the suspects. So you have to go through the whole rigmarole right before you can even talk to us. So they'd asked around, and then I think a day or two later, we went to Bahrain to NCIS headquarters for CENTCOM is in Bahrain, and they brought us in one at a time. They went through the whole rigmarole, took our pictures, fingerprints, DNA, and then they put the piece of paper down. told us what we were accused of, read us our rights, and they said, "Do you want a lawyer present?" I said, "Yes," and that, that ended that process, right? So I never, and to this day, Colby will tell you, the best thing the three of us did was we didn't say anything to anybody.
But let me ask you on the flip side of that, because I know from a law enforcement perspective what I'm asking for in an investigation or in an interview or whatever, however you want to put it.
Yeah.
How hard is it on the other side to think in your mind that you were right, that you did all your actions right, and not say a fucking word?
That is a great question, because I think everybody wants to prove their innocence immediately, right? Like it's hard not to. Like there's this driving force within us to basically explain ourselves, right? Explain our actions. And that's probably stems from, as a child, right? You want to tell your parents, no, like you want to try to save your ass, essentially, right, when you're a kid. It was very hard, but it was ultimately the right thing to do, because I've, you know it from being in law enforcement, right? Like when you start saying stuff, you now open up Pandora's box to a lot of things, right? Because the way you say something and how you think it comes off is completely different than how somebody else interprets it, right? And let's be real, like investigators, police officers, you guys are trained to find the little things, right? And pull the thread, right? So long answer, it was very difficult to not say anything, but I'm happy I didn't, because let's be real, right? You are not going to prove your innocence in an interrogation room talking to an investigator. That's not the place that anybody's going to find you innocent. So
I would disagree with that to a point.
okay.
There are definitely, I think if you have an investigator with an open mind who's ready to look at the situation as a totality of the circumstances, you very much can prove your innocence there. I've seen it personally myself in interviews that I've done, but I understand what you're saying. So let me ask you then, you don't talk to anybody, you don't talk to them. How many times, honestly, when you're on your own with your own thoughts, are you telling your story to yourself?
Every day. I did that every day for 4 years, So yeah, I haven't recently, but I talked it over and I played the situation over and talked about it in my mind to myself many times.
Do you ever doubt yourself in those conversations?
Uh Maybe not doubt myself, but many times, and like we just talked about, a few minutes ago, it's like, shit, Eric, why didn't you just take him to the hospital? Right?
Right.
I've asked myself that, it's like, don't get me wrong, I've thought of it, but yeah.
So as this is all going on, when do they move you out of theater back to the United States?
This this happened January 1st. So we went to Bahrain, and we had 3 other guys from the camp with us as, babysitters, essentially. And then we went from Bahrain to Kuwait, and those guys went back to Kurdistan, and me, Danny, Josh, and I are left at this camp in Kuwait to basically, nobody was helping us get back. So we figured that all out on our own. And we were able to jump on to a plane that left, I think it was like the 20th or 21st of January, with other soldiers, back to the States. I think we flew into DC. I think we flew into Ronald Reagan, and then from there, uh, the unit came and guys came and picked us up in some vans and brought us back home.
So you told the guys in the very beginning, this is about to get bad. When you get back to the United States, when do you realize, shit, this is bad?
Well, it didn't take me getting back to the United States to realize that. I mean, I went into work, but they put me in the aid station. I had no responsibility. I couldn't see any patients, and I was just basically sitting at a desk all day, not doing anything. So yeah, immediately they stripped us of our responsibilities and our sense of purpose.
So how's that feel?
Terrible. It was that was probably the biggest that was probably the biggest issue I went through emotionally, psychologically, was the fact that I was a respected guy in the community. I was good at my job. I loved my job. Um, and I had a sense of purpose, and then all that was taken away from me, and it sucked. It was really bad. It took me. I didn't get over that for probably 2 years. Probably took me 2 years to finally like turn the page on that and realize, hey, Eric, that life that you worked so hard to have in the military, it's never going to happen again. It's over.
Okay, so we know how you perceived yourself at that point. How do you think everyone else perceived you that you were working with?
I think uh I think a lot of the guys that knew me felt bad for me, what I was going through. I had heard some other people in the community talking shit essentially, but it's easy to talk shit and critique people on something that you weren't even a part of and have no idea what really happened. So, but I mean, it didn't. I beat myself up more than I think anybody else could have. And what I mean by beating myself up more was just kind of getting in my own head about how my life was changing and how that had affected me.
What was it that you were hearing people were saying? Is there anything in particular that you can still think of?
I think the biggest thing that people were saying is like, why wouldn't you take him? Why wouldn't you take him to a hospital? So, I had a close friend that I talked to about that too, and I said, hey, and he's the same job I did. He said, well, yeah, I would have taken him to the hospital. He said, but if it was one of my guys from the team, he said, then I would have done what you did. So he would have done the same thing, but just with a different, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's a safe answer, though. I think that
Yeah,
answer hedges your bets. It says, well, in that situation, I would have done this, but with my guy, so he's playing both sides of the fence essentially to me.
exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really that answer is a non-answer to me.
Yeah.
So as you're back here, I guess we should start getting into the details of the case and what's happening. You're assigned. You have civilian defense attorneys, but you're also assigned military defense attorneys, correct?
Yeah. So, like I had hired Colby Vokey, and then I'm entitled to a military lawyer, and um, I'm home, back home. It's the end of January. We aren't officially charged until I think it was like December 6th or 7th of 2021,
So
and
a full year almost.
almost a year until we're actually charged. So the entire investigation took that long.
So what did they tell you in Bahrain? I thought that they charged you there.
Sorry, if I said charged, sorry, we were accused of.
But
They
no
gave us
official
orders.
charges.
No official charges.
Okay.
No.
All
Yeah.
right, got it.
So
So a
we're
year to get the charges.
Yep. It was involuntary manslaughter, negligent homicide, obstructing justice, and then a couple of orders violations. One was for drinking alcohol, which is a violation of General Order Number 1, and I can't remember. I can't remember what the other orders violation was for. But we all had those 5, and then Danny and Josh had one more involuntary manslaughter charge because they actually touched Rick Rodriguez, in the fight. And then we had our Article 15 hearing, which is basically a grand jury for the military. And we were all, and the three of us were all like basically clumped together. Like we thought it was going to be a trial with all three of us, a joint trial. But shortly after that, the convening authority, our general, separated me. I was on my own, and then had Danny and Josh in a common trial. And my trial was set up to be first. It was supposed to be in May 2020. And then, as we all know, what happened in March 2020 with COVID. And then that delayed everything for a long time. And there's multiple stories from that delay and what that led to. So,
Let's talk about, though, the emotions that you're going through. It takes a year to get charged, so we're a year into this already.
Yeah.
Then COVID hits, and that slows everything down. What are the emotions that you're going through at this time?
Well, very anxious, right? Especially before COVID, very anxious, very scared. Um, it was terrifying. And then once COVID happened, everything kind of started getting delayed and kicked the can, kicked down the road, kicked down the road, kicked down the road. And it would suck because like you're getting amped up thinking like trials coming and you're unbelievably nervous. And then it would get delayed again and again. But one thing that helped me during this is, when COVID happened, all the units were, I think across the military, it was, hey, non-essential personnel don't come back into work. And I think it probably took like a month or so for people to kind of start trickling back into work. But on the list of essential personnel at, 2nd Raider Battalion, Eric Gilmet was on the bottom, right? So I'm not coming back in. And not only that, but it had been so long that I told the senior chief, Sean, who I basically worked for. I said, "Hey man, I'm not coming back in." I said, "If you need me, give me a call, but I'm not fucking showing up. This is stupid. I'm not going to sit here and just look at a computer and not accomplish anything." And nobody said anything to me, and I was able to. From March 2020 until August 2023, when I retired, I went into work, I don't know, 5 times.
So, which is worse, knowing the outcome or not knowing what's going to happen?
You mean like knowing what would have happened? That you mean like knowing that my charges were going to get dismissed, or not knowing? Like
By not knowing, because essentially you didn't know anything, but they could have also come to you and said, "Yeah, this is it. You're going to prison for the rest of your life." So, which is worse, the anticipation of knowing what's going on, or them actually telling you this is the bad news?
I would think if they were like, "Hey, you're going to jail," that would have been worse because, you know, but yeah, the not knowing also hurts. But the not knowing is difficult. But at the same time, as everything was going on, like we knew the truth, right? And we knew the story, and we knew it was going to come out sooner or later, like whether it be in trial or not, the story was going to come out. And we felt confident that no sane person, after watching the video and hearing all the testimony, would find any of us guilty for the big things. Like there was just no way. Now you can tell yourself that, right? But that doesn't mean it's always going to be true. So that's in the back of your mind. But that was comforting knowing that. And Danny always preached that to us, and he was right, right? That's how it unfolded in their trial. They are found not guilty of the big stuff. They were only found guilty for violating General Order Number 1.
Right, which is at best non-judicial punishment.
Yeah, but as we've talked about before, since they were found guilty of it in a general court martial, they were felons.
Right, which is all right. We'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
I think we need to bring the big point of this story and your main sticking point of this whole story, and that's a colonel that was brought into this. I need you to explain the situation of where all of these defense attorneys meet. They meet with this colonel, and there's things said in this meeting alone. So this is before like November 2021 is when this is all going down, correct?
This it was right before Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay.
So
we're 2 years into it already. And then this meeting happens. Okay, go ahead.
This meeting happens. Yeah. So so before I kind of jump into, I need to like kind of put lay the foundation of the story out so people understand some things I'm talking about. So it's November, like end of November, and my trial is scheduled for January 2022. So we're a couple months away. And at this and there were some changes that had happened. I think it was that year or the year before within the military justice system, to where they had these convening authorities, right? And that was basically your commanding officer, your general for unit. They're the ones that basically said, okay, we're going to charge Eric with these crimes, right? And the prosecution answered to the basic, and they would get briefed by the prosecution only. Well, the the Congress had made some changes to the UCMJ to where they were removing a convening authority from big cases like murder, rape, sexual assault, things like that, and basically putting it in the hands of like a local prosecutor, military prosecutor who would serve as, I guess you could say, like a district attorney, right?
That's exactly
And
right.
they're the ones that would determine if somebody's going to get charged or not a service member's boss, right? So my military lawyer, I had two of them, Matt and Keegan, and they've both been my lawyers for almost a couple years at this point. Matt was going to this meeting, and he didn't want to go, but his boss like, no, you're going to it. So he goes, and the meeting is with Colonel Shaw, and Colonel Shaw was at the time. There are four basically chiefs of staff that work for colonels that work for the staff judge advocate to the commandant, and that's a 2-star general. His name was Major General Bly, and these four men had like very important roles within the JAG community. Colonel Shaw's was for slating and job assignment of lawyers, and he's at this meeting. He like introduces himself, and they're talking about like all these changes to the military justice system. And that led to Matt's question. And what he asked Colonel Shaw is, he said, what is going to be done to protect those prosecutors, that are basically taking this new role of a district attorney? What's going to be done to protect them in their career? So a very simple question, one that could be answered very politically. Like, he could have just simply said, hey, we understand that's kind of a point of contention. They will be protected from outside influences and things like that. Like he could easily have answered this and just very simply, right? But instead, he looks at my lawyer, Matt, and says, Captain Thomas, I know who you are and what cases you're working on, and you are not protected. And he says, you think you're shielded, but that's illegal. You think you're protected, but that's a legal fiction. He said, the lawyers on the promotion board are going to know what you did. And then Colonel Shaw highlights an example to prove his point. He talks about the defense lawyers from the Haditha cases who were not promoted. Well, he said that because he knows my civilian lawyer is Colby Vokey, who was one of those guys. He was one of those defense lawyers that wasn't promoted to colonel. Him and Colonel Shaw knew each other because, like I said, Colby, my lawyer, was the lead defense counsel out there on the West Coast for these. Colonel Shaw was his opposite. He was the lead trial counsel. So they knew each other, right? So when he had said that, and he had said some other things like we talked about that were very off the wall, but we're not going to get into that. But, immediately after that, everybody that was in there was like, what the fuck? It was built more like did he really just fucking say that? And they made some statements, and word spread really quickly what had happened. Colby Vokey called me and said, hey man, this is what's going on. And I was like, holy shit. And we put in motions to dismiss the case with prejudice to our lawyer, to the judge, because of what he had said, saying that Colonel Shaw had committed unlawful command influence. And
well, I think it needs to be pointed out for people to understand that the question that he was asking was about command influence, and he answered that question with command influence.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. It's like, what's going to be done to stop unlawful command of influence?
Right.
And then he threatens my lawyer.
Right. So he essentially answered the question completely. This is what's going to happen, and I'll show you because I'll do it right now.
Oh yeah, it was wild, man. Like everything from that to the government trying to basically sweep under the rug what he had said, like, oh, it's not a big deal. He didn't mean that, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, this is a big deal. You can't do that. You can't threaten somebody's lawyer. And as much as the government tried to argue that, he had said some stuff wrong, but we've proven that he was false in what he said, and defense lawyers are important, and the job they do is protected. Well, it went all the way to the military Supreme Court, and they completely disagree with the government.
Right. Sticking with this, though, we also should point out, because you kind of breezed over it, that this didn't just happen in front of your attorney. This happened in front of like
Oh.
8 attorneys in the room.
Yeah, it was like, I think it's always like between like 6 or 8, right,
Yeah.
to include Matt. And so a bunch of captains and lieutenants, but then his boss, Major, was in there as well. So they all wrote affidavits talking about what Colonel Shaw had said, and their interpretations of what he meant.
But think about this too, because you and I have kind of talked about it. When you make that command influence decision in front of all those people, you just pointed out everyone sitting there is a lieutenant, a captain, a major. Everyone is underneath that rank. So that not only puts a message out to your attorney, but every attorney sitting at that table.
Oh, absolutely.
So it affects way more than just your case. That's a butterfly effect.
And that was one thing I believe the government was trying to stop. I think we all know what he was saying. He was saying the quiet part out loud, right? If you do a good job and get these guys acquitted, we're gonna fuck you over. That's exactly what he's saying. Not just Matt. We're talking everybody, right? And that, dude, that leads down to a rabbit hole about basically a systemic issue within the military JAG Corps. But the issue with that too is, imagine what would happen if it was found out that what he said was true. I mean, everything completely unravels, right?
Every case that he's been a part of, every case that he has touched is now tainted.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So it could have opened up a can of worms that people would. I mean, we're talking about shaking the core, the foundations of the JAG Corps completely. And they were trying everything they could do to stop that. But even then, they didn't really do a good job, because they were still basically defending Colonel Shaw. They defended him through the investigation. The fellow JAG Colonel Houts that conducted it said, "Oh yeah, he didn't do anything wrong." All the way to the Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals saying he didn't do anything wrong either, and there was no UCI. I mean, they did a terrible job with that, because they could have thrown him under the bus immediately, and he could have been the fall guy for all this, and they didn't.
So what's more dangerous to you in going through all of this, a veiled threat or a straight threat?
Oh, a veiled threat for sure. Because you don't know what other insidious ways this can affect you, right? There's nothing scarier than a veiled threat, because I come up to you, DJ. Hey, I'm gonna kick the shit out of you, right? I'm threatening you. You know where the threat's coming from. You know it's me, right? And you know what to expect. Hey, man, one of these days, me and my boys are gonna get you, and then I walk off. You don't know.
Right.
That's scarier, isn't it?
Right.
Oh shit. So
you don't know who you're looking for.
You don't know who you're looking for. So
I guess when they leave this meeting, how do you feel to know that all of these attorneys left the meeting with the same impression? That Shaw not only threatened your career, but the career at the people at the tables. Do you think at that moment, because you and I have talked about the emotions going back and forth, do you think, all right, this is it. This is what we needed to show to get this taken care of? Is that how you feel?
Oh yeah. Once everything started once that happened and the ball started rolling, I had that thought, like, oh my God, it's been 2 years, and this really just happened, and my case is going to be over. Right now, granted, there were appeal. I had to go through the motion hearings with my judge, and eventually he dismissed it. But then I went through another emotional roller coaster with the appeals process, right? And then I remember at one point I was talking to my dad about it, and what we were talking about Colonel Shaw, and he's like, He's like, that guy's an idiot, right? I said, no, he's not. I said, I'm not, and I'm not mad. And he was like, he's an idiot, and he was like almost mad at Colonel Shaw. I'm like, I'm not mad at him. Like this guy just saved my ass by saying this. He prevented me from going to trial. So I'm happy that this guy came around and did this. Because without him doing that and making that terrible mistake of threatening my lawyer, I'm going to trial. You know.
So, okay, there's a lot of questions that come from that statement. When you look at it and you see that you're going to go to trial, did you think, because you said you tried to stay positive the whole time through and your attorneys talked to you and all that kind of stuff, did you think that if you go to trial, you're going to prison?
No, I didn't. There was actually. I'm gonna kind of backtrack here. It's actually the beginning of November, so like a couple weeks before Colonel Shaw's comments, we had to do a deposition of the Canadian doctor that saw him at the hospital we took him to. And the I won't go into the full story, but he had signed off on a document that was pretty damaging to the prosecution's case. And when my lawyer called out this doctor on these mistakes that were made, the prosecution asked us for a copy of that document, so they weren't even really tracking this. But when I saw that unfold, and my lawyer, this is my first time I really had seen him kind of in action, right? Like, we're not actively in trial, but he's questioning a witness, right? Seeing just how he handled it, and it was funny. Just how he had kind of teed this guy up for these lines of question, and then made him look dumb. When I saw it, I was like, Eric, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Because, like, again, we had the truth on our side, but I also had a really good lawyer that knew what the hell he was doing.
So let's talk about, though, because after that happens, you start to feel good about the trial. They assign a colonel to investigate Colonel Shaw. They most definitely knew each other. There was like 53 colonels at the time in the Marine Corps, and in the JAG Corps, I think we've narrowed it down to like 4 or 5 colonels.
It was very low.
A very small number. I don't know the exact number, but then they start doing that. So at that point, do you think the system can correct itself, or do you think that the deck is still stacked against you?
No, when I had heard who that they had assigned as the investigating officer, I knew it was probably going to be a sham investigation. And obviously, well, hell, hang on, we didn't even know who was investigating until, so the investigation took place. We had the original motion hearing that we had after Colonel Shaw's comments was, I think, like December 21st. And then we had scheduled another motion hearing in January, I think like the middle of January. And it was in the beginning of January that the investigation was actually conducted. And the Inspector General's office, whoever received it, sent it to the prosecution, not to us. And the prosecution held on to that investigation until like 2 days before the motion hearing. That really pissed off my lawyer. But so we didn't really know what was going on. But when we had gotten it and read through it and saw how they had picked a JAG colonel and all this stuff and what his answers were, my lawyer was like, this makes sense that they did it like this,
So let's talk about that motion hearing. What's the atmosphere like in the room?
You mean that first one or that second one?
When the one that you find out where it's been assigned and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, we didn't know that motion hearing. My lawyer was actually let me back up. He was actually pretty pissed about it, and he let his frustrations be known to the judge. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is a sham investigation, all this stuff. Like, he had no time to really go through it, right? I mean, probably the most interesting motion hearing I had was the one in December, where, we have, the government putting forward, the burden had shifted to the government to try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that UCI wouldn't affect the proceedings. You had my statement that I had made, You had the statements from my 2 military lawyers. You had the affidavits from of those defense lawyers that were present. Then you got the government with all their stuff that they're trying to present. And the bottom line is, when we started that motion hearing, my judge, asked Matt and Keegan, "Hey, do you believe there's a conflict of interest?" I said yes, and they said they wanted to be removed from the case. Uh, the judge asked me. I said, "Hey, can I get a moment to talk to my lawyer?" So me and Colby went in the back and talked for a little bit, and I came out and said, "Yeah, I want him. I don't want him as my lawyers anymore. There's a conflict here, and I've lost trust and confidence in them." And when I said that, the judge had this reaction, like he like put his it's almost like he put his hand on his head, and he like looked down at his desk, and I got this feeling that he was thinking, "Fuck." Like, it almost like he had this look on his face, this reaction, like, I have to dismiss these charges now. I have to do it because it's a big deal. Like, that does not happen a lot in the military. But he knew that the fact that Colonel Shaw had said these things and threatened my lawyers, and now I'm like, hey, there's a conflict here. I can't have them anymore. He knew, even though it was the hard thing to do, he was going to have to be the guy that dismissed him. And I'm sure he got a lot of flack for doing that within his community. I'm sure he did.
So how hard was it emotionally to essentially fire the people who'd been in this fight with you from the beginning?
It was tough because Matt and Keegan are exceptional lawyers. I mean, they are awesome. And it sucked. It sucked losing Matt because during this 2 years, me and him actually had become really, really good friends. We common interests, and just guys that thought the same, and he was just a good dude. And I felt pissed losing him because he was a great lawyer and a good friend at the time.
When that happens and your case gets overturned, walk us through the emotion of that judge dropping the charges.
Yeah, so like I said, that second motion hearing was around the end of January, and I think it was like February 9th. He had made his decision and gave us his written decision, and I was ecstatic. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, Colby called me and told me, and I ran upstairs yelling for my wife Mindy, and she knew immediately what had happened without me even saying it, because she could just hear the excitement in my voice calling for her. And I hugged her and we cried, and it was great, man. It's tough to describe, right? But even then, like, once all that kind of settled down, those immediate emotions, like, the weight still hadn't been lifted from my shoulders. It took a while for that to happen, right? But even then, like, still at the command, they didn't give a shit. It wasn't like, hell yeah, Eric, this is great. Come on back to work, buddy. It was, no, the government's probably going to appeal this, and we got to keep waiting, kind of thing. So I was, basically back in that same situation. And I mean, I never left it.
Right. I guess the question would be, do you think, because you're two military lawyers, right? They were essentially sacrificial lambs in this. They were.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Let's say you don't do that. Does your charges get dropped?
No, it doesn't. I think it definitely would have allowed for an appeal if I had been found guilty on something, right? But I don't think they get dropped.
So how does that make you feel? You have to sacrifice, in your own words, a friend of yours in order to save yourself.
Well, I mean, it's what needed to be done. I mean, you're sitting there, and it's like, I can't imagine what's going through Matt's mind, right? Like, well, shit, if I do a good job, I'm fucked. you know? Yeah. He's got a wife and a young son at the time, and dude, this affected him and Keegan. I mean, once his contract was up, Matt was gone. I think Keegan's out now too.
That's you hear stuff like that and it's crazy. So you go through the excitement of that the charges have been dropped. It takes a while to set in that this is actually over, but then it's not over. And actually what they said, they're probably going to appeal this, happens. It goes into the appellate court. Well, first off, when you hear it's going to the appellate court, what are you feeling?
I'm pissed. I'm pissed because I remember going through this whole process, and there were times I would go meet up with, you know, we had a couple master chiefs, a regimental master chief and the command master chief, and I would go talk to them, and it was nice. They allowed me to vent. And I'm like, this is bullshit, this and that, and it was always like, Eric, we got to let the process play out. We got to let the process play out. And then this UCI happens, and my charges are dismissed. And the government appeals it. The convening authority could have stepped in at any moment and said, okay, we're fucking done with this. What Colonel Shaw did was bullshit. This is over. But they didn't. And I would go in and tell my master chiefs, I'm like, please go to the command and go to bat for me. Like, go in there and fight them with their own line. Like, if they say, hey, we gotta let the process be the process, you can counter that and say, hey, sir, we did let that happen, and a colonel fucked it up. Now's the time to end this shit for Eric. Let the dude just let him get out of the military and go about his life. It's over. But they didn't. They kept allowing this to drag on and more psychological turmoil, because the government, I think, after it was dismissed, I think that they had like 3 or 5 weeks to submit if they're going to appeal it or not. And of course they do. And shit, it went before NMCCA that summer. And I think it was August, September when they came back with their decision that they were going to overturn the dismissal. And, now I'm going through another ridiculous, emotional roller coaster, right? Like I talked about on the phone with you the other night. I was doing some woodworking in my garage, and I got the call from my appellate lawyer what had happened, and I sat down on the garage floor and I cried for a half an hour, and I called my wife who was at work on base, and I told her what happened. I said, I need you to come home right now, and she did. She told her boss, she said, hey, I have to go. And then she came home, and we talked and stuff, but it was just like, I'm just going through this bullshit all over again. It's like, why can't this just fucking end?
So with that, you in the letter that you wrote to me, you talked about the commanding general never stepping in, like we just talked about there. So do you think that him never stepping in is it fear? Is it politics? Is it something else? Has it gone higher than, because a general definitely outranks a colonel? Do you think it had gone higher and there was fear by that general about his career?
No, and this is something I've thought about a lot. And this is the problem with the military justice system is the military, right?
Okay.
So, what I mean by that is, and that being a public servant yourself and working for being a police officer, there's this desire by people that really buy into it to protect the institution at all cost, right? And that's what this is, right? It's like, man, we can't have anybody thinking that we have a bunch of undisciplined cowboys. We need to protect the Marine Corps at all cost, or the Army, Navy, whatever, right? They don't want us. They don't want to be under a bad light ever, or cast under a bad shadow ever. So they'll do whatever it takes to uphold this image of the institution. And the problem with that is, is what makes the institution a great place? The people. It's not the title, it's the people within it that make it good. But they don't see it that way. That's the problem. That's why nobody stepped in and did anything. That's why right there.
You talk to your master chiefs about going and talking to that general and using that logic that you said. Let's say you get to talk to him. What do you say to him? What? Let me set that question up a little different. What do you say to him while you're going through it? And now that you are through it, what do you say to him?
I wouldn't. I've never thought about that, but sitting here thinking about now and what I've learned, I wouldn't have said anything to him to try to plead my case to him, because that's not going to work. I would have only have asked him for one thing. Let the defense lawyers have a meeting with you and let them talk to you. And that actually, they tried to do that. Our lawyers sent an email to his office requesting a meeting with him, and they denied it. They basically, they're kind of coming at the angle like, hey, you're only getting one side of the story from the prosecution. Let us come talk to you and give you our side of the story, which is something that needs to happen, right? Like, why does the prosecution get to, obviously that's not happening anymore, but why did the prosecution get to talk to our commanding general? That makes no sense to me. So yeah, I mean, talking to those dudes is as much as we want to, and like kind of going back to the thing of like how you want to prove your innocence to people, you want to explain yourself to them. What I've learned from this is it doesn't matter. Nobody gives a shit, right? Especially these people in these higher ranking positions. They don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care what you have to say. So talking to him would have been pointless. So yeah, I would have asked him to just listen. Let our defense lawyers come talk to you. That's what I would have asked him.
All right. So now that you're through it, what do you say to him?
Well, I had 3 different convening authorities. That's how long this took. 3 generals came through. I would probably talk to the first one and tell him he's a piece of shit coward.
Okay. Which is kind of what I thought you would say, but
yeah, it took me a while to get to that one. So, I did have a chance to talk to General Glenn. He was the second one. I went to the change of command for the commanding general. And I was talking to some people I knew, and he walked past me and saw me, and he came up and talked to me. Now, he's the outgoing, right? And we talked for a little bit, and he said, hey, he gave me that political line. He said, we were just trying to, let the process be the process and this and that. And, we had your guys' back and stuff like that. And man, I wanted to so bad. I had to bite my tongue and say, no, you're not. You don't have our backs. You're not letting the process be the process. I wanted so bad, because I think at this time my stuff had been dismissed. I wanted so bad to say, you can end this right now, and you've chosen not to. But what does that accomplish, right? It would have accomplished nothing.
you don't think you would have felt better?
You don't think I would have felt better?
No, I'm asking you. You don't think you would have felt better if you would have said that? I know it's a very dumb thing to say, but feel better about it. But I mean, when that's all you got, that's all you got.
I think that's a valid point, right? But at the same time, it's like, really what's going to make me feel better, right? Is it saying that to somebody, or is it being able to retire honorably and live out my life how I want to be? That's the end goal, right? And maybe that's something that I kind of learn, and because obviously, from this I grew a lot as a person, right? I learned along the way, as much as I want to tell people to fuck off or whatever the case may be, it doesn't accomplish anything, right? What was the ultimate fuck you to everybody was I won, right? I beat the government. Danny and Josh beat the government, right? My name is going to live on forever in the UCMJ because they're going to the Supreme Court.
Of course.
Eric Gilmet versus the United States will be brought up for years to come, long after we're all dead, because of what I went through and Danny and Josh went through and how we won. That's the biggest fuck you to everybody. And I don't have to say anything.
So is that a fulfilling victory or is that a hollow victory?
It was a fulfilling victory. Everything we went through, the fact that people from our command were against us, wanted us to fail, thought we were pieces of shit, didn't step in and do the right thing when they had ample opportunity to do things. This is a good victory. Is it hollow when are there aspects of it that are kind of hollow? Probably. You know, the fact that I didn't get to end my military career how I wanted to, but I can't change that.
Let me pose this to you, though. What I mean by hollow victory is, yes, it will live on. Yes, that court case will be shown as case law and all of that kind of stuff, right? But you said those people that thought you were a piece of shit, don't you think those people still think you're a piece of shit?
Yeah, of course they still think that.
Exactly. And that's
yeah.
the big one to me, is that you do all this, you're cleared, yet you can't clear their conscience. And so when I say a hollow victory, I mean, those people are still going to think what they thought about you. And that's where, that I know for myself, that's where it's hard for me to take it in, is that, well, it didn't change their opinion. They still think I'm a piece of shit, and I'll never change that opinion.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I think that's a lot of, that's an issue a lot of people face in life with any kind of situation, right? But, you know, we can't, you know this, we can't control what other people think about us. We just can't,
100%.
you know?
And the reason I
as
look
long
at
as
it,
you're right, as long as you're right in your mind and you know what's right, then that's what matters.
and I go back to that whole thing that we've talked about this whole conversation. You said when you're a kid or when you're accused of something, you just want people to know this is what happened. I'm right in this. You want that person to think you're right. And when you never achieve that, essentially, that's where I say hollow victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good way to look at it. I never really even thought about it like that. So, but you know, it definitely doesn't feel hollow to me because, you know, every morning I get to wake up and look out at my lake and watch the loons swim by and, you know, just and do what I want to do every day because I'm retired.
And
So
I ultimately think that's more important than
yeah,
them changing, their thoughts on you, because they're going to go
exactly,
away.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. So let's talk about the final kind of phase of this, where it goes to the CAAF, which is the Supreme Court in military law.
Yeah.
You and I had talked about when the prosecution starts, they get about a minute or two into their stuff. And
Yeah.
the Supreme, I guess the Chief Justice stops them.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
set this up and walk us through what happened there, because I think this is where the government, quote unquote, saw your side of it. They finally saw what you had been trying to say the whole time.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, it's an open forum. I'm there, my wife, my mom, Danny and Josh are there, their significant others. My lawyers are all there. And there was a lot of other people there in the room. It was packed. Not just, you know, Marine personnel, but, you know, Army and Air Force lawyers. Everybody knew that this was a big deal, what was going on. And you know, like I said, like my appellate lawyer, she did phenomenal. Every question she had, she answered great, to the point, and then moved on. Right? It wasn't. She was able to. You know, it's good when she's able to hit all the points she wants to hit. Right? Because they have their layout of what they want to talk about. The prosecution did not get to do that, and you know, he was faced with the number one question out of all of this. What did Colonel Shaw mean? What was his point in saying that? What was his intent? And you know, the government's trying to explain what he meant, and you know, I know what the Chief Justice was getting at. He was getting at, we'll never know because he never explained it. Nobody ever got a chance to question him about this. So we have to take what he said at face value, right? And at face value, they are very bad comments. They are threats. So, so basically he's like telling the prosecution, what are we supposed to do? Right? If he's not going to talk and explain what he meant, if we're not allowed to put him through a line of questioning, we have to take it at face value and treat it as such. It's a threat. There was a conflict. Case is dismissed, essentially.
I think we should point out, though, because we did breeze over it, that the reason they were never able to interview and they were only asked to provide an affidavit was that colonel said, if you ever call me to the stand, I'll plead the fifth.
Yeah, he absolutely said that. He said that multiple times. I think he did for sure. He made 2 statements, possibly a third, I think. Yeah, and he said that at the end of all of them. So, he screwed over the government when he did that. He put them in a no-win situation. But he knew he had done something wrong. So
let me ask you something that I've thought about in this whole thing. Do you think the prosecution believed in their case?
That's a great question. And there was one prosecutor, Major Duncan. I really respected that guy. He seemed like a guy who was just simply doing his job, right? To where there was, I didn't actually hear this, but during Danny and Josh's trial, it's all really close. Like everybody's right by the lawyers, and it's either Danny or Josh's lawyer was talking about, my medical experience and my training and my devotion to saving lives. And he had actually brought up his analogy was if something had happened to one of these prosecutors right now, Eric would be the first one to jump over the barrier and save their life. And the lead prosecutor, Colonel shows people could hear them talking. He leaned over to Major Duncan and said, "No, he wouldn't. Like Eric wouldn't do that." And Major Duncan looked at him and said, "Yes, he would." And so that kind of solidified for me that the guy was, a good dude just doing his job. Like he knew the deal, right? He wasn't an ass. And I talked to him after the trial, and I kind of got emotional with him, and I asked him, I said, "Can I get your number and your email? And can I reach out to you in the future when the time's right for me to talk about this?" And he said, "Yeah." And I did. I called him, and I never got an answer. Maybe he was deployed. I don't know. I might reach out to him again, but I would love to be able to talk to him. And I've even reached out to my judge. He hasn't replied back. I don't think he ever will, but I'd like to talk to him as well and get his thoughts on everything. So,
which judge are you talking about?
Commander Larson. He was my judge in the trial. He's the one that dismissed my charges.
So let me ask you, though. I've asked you this whole time, what would you say to these people? We've talked about the general and things like that, and you said there's no point in saying it. I'm not going to get anything out of it. So I got to ask you, what do you think you're going to get out of talking to these people?
All I'm looking to get out of them is like my judge, I really just want to ask him what went through your mind when we presented you with the UCI motion, and then ultimately dismissing the case, and I've always wanted to ask him about that reaction that I saw of him on the bench when I asked for my lawyers to be, to get rid of my lawyers. I don't know. I guess it's kind of a closure thing for me. It's not. I'm not really looking for anything. I just want to kind of know like their mindset, and it's literally just for me. I'm not going to write a book about this. I'm not going to do it. I would never. If I got to talk to them, I would never disclose what was being talked about in a podcast. It's literally just some thoughts I've had over the years. Like what was your guys' mindsets for some of these things, right? So
then I got to ask the question then, because you've said it numerous times about the other people. What does it change?
it doesn't change anything, but at the same time, I don't want it to change anything. Like, I'm not reaching out to them in an effort to change something, right? I just want to. These are just two men that I've wanted to talk about this case from and hear things about it from their side. That's really it. I'm not doing this to change anything. I'm not reaching out to them to change anything.
Do you,
It's literally just to talk to them.
do you think it at some level though it goes back to that whole where we've said it from the very beginning of this? You just want to tell your side and let people know that you're right. Does that feed into it?
No, no. The purpose of wanting to talk to them is not even to talk about my story that night. It's really just to talk to two, I guess you call it, two different aspects of the case. Because everything was from my side, right? The defense side.
Right.
I'm interested to hear some things from the prosecution side. I'm interested to hear some things from the judge's side, right? Because he's obviously very involved in all this as well, right? He's in it, you know. Yeah, I guess there's just been this fascination or this desire to know, like, I wonder what these guys were thinking during this.
So you don't think the question, do you think I was right, would ever come up?
No, because I don't,
Okay.
I don't need to know that because we were right. I don't need their validation to know that we were right.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Do you believe that the precedent set in your case, it's going to protect other service members and defense lawyers, or will the system, will there always be unlawful command influence?
Oh yeah. Again, UCI is always going to happen because you have the military involved. It's going to happen. It's human nature. You can't stop human nature, right? A general is going to say something. A colonel's going to say something. You know, um, and until like we had talked about, there's multiple examples of UCI in military history. I think one of the most for my bachelor's program, my capstone project was about the military justice system and some issues within it. And one of the things I talked about was UCI, and the example I gave was from I think it was the battalion commander. I think that the guys that were involved in Haditha, I think it was 3rd Marines. I don't know which battalion, but I think it was a battalion within 3rd Marines, and I think that the battalion commander was one that was charged with these crimes, and they had discovered that there was UCI being committed by, at the time, General Mathis. He was the first MEF commander, and his SJA, because as he was the MEF commander, he was also at that time in charge of like Marine forces in Iraq. So they were like kind of under that umbrella of him being the area commander, and then his SJA that was with him at one MEF was also the SJA with him in the Middle East, if that makes sense. And so all these things happen over there. So they were like, he was basically the overall convening authority, and they had committed some UCI. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they weren't doing things correctly. And this colonel's charges ended up getting overturned at the appeal process. So you have these two guys, very senior men, who have committed UCI. It's been proven. It was talked about at the appellate court. It's written down forever in history what they did. UCMJ is a punishable, or excuse me, UCI is a punishable offense within the UCMJ. What happened to those two guys? One became the Secretary of Defense, and one became the staff judge advocate to the commandant. So obviously they never got in trouble, right? So I say that because in my mind, that's just a glaring example of how it's going to continue to happen. And it's going to continue to happen also because nobody is ever found guilty of it and held accountable for it. I mean, hell, Colonel Shaw, what happened to him? He was allowed to retire as a full bird colonel. He's living a pretty good life, So, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you get that. I don't know. I don't know how you change it. I really don't,
I,
because these people are trying to protect the institution, and if they start holding these people accountable, they're just showing how the institution is fucked up. So I don't know. I don't know.
so let's look back on this whole thing, this whole chapter of your life, right? Because we've said it over and over that this is just a small section of your career. You lived for years in this career, being a highly decorated uh, person, respected in your field. How do you look at this? Do you look at it as a fight for yourself, or do you look at it as a fight for something bigger? Because you just said undue command influence or unlawful command influence will never change. So was this a fight for yourself, or was it for something bigger?
Um, you hope it's for something bigger, but in the end, it is just a fight for myself, right? Um, Granted, has this now become, case law that can be used? Yeah. Um, but it's not something bigger right now, but that's something I want to change. I have, um, I want to, I'm kind of going through the motions to try to get the ball rolling to be a person that can do that. But policy needs to change, right? At the congressional level, they control all that stuff. And the policy has to be that these leaders are going to be held accountable for what they do. I mean, shit. Pete Hegseth talked about it. About service members losing faith and confidence in their leadership. Well, here's a way to fix that, right? And nobody's doing it. So that's something I'd like to change. And I'm trying to figure out how to go about doing that. And I think I'm taking the first steps to do that. I'm pursuing a master's degree in public leadership, and I want to kind of use that as a platform to propel myself to be able to insert myself into areas in the government to try to get a change on that.
But you just said you're talking about Pete Hegseth. Do you think that's just lip service, or do you think he's serious about it? Because I don't think he's serious. I think it's lip service.
I thought he was serious, and we're about to go on a tangent here, but I don't think he is anymore. I mean, and I hope he hears this podcast, 'cause I'd tell it to his face. All that shit that happened with the Signal debacle, him putting the message on his Signal. Uh, I know he didn't start the chat, but he put it on there, and it got out to the wrong people, and he should have stepped down after that. So, a case in point, like me, right? Let's say I'm a petty officer, Eric Gilmet, and I put out a troop movement on Signal. What do you think would happen to me?
Oh, you would go to Leavenworth for sure.
Yeah. So, hey, Pete, you effed up, dude. He should probably step down. So when I saw that, I thought, damn it, man! Like here, you talked about doing that, man, and you're not doing it because it's his ass, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a tangent, but
No. I understand, but I think it goes back to show the point again that not only do we protect do people protect sometimes their institutions, but they protect their tribes.
oh, absolutely, and I get it, right? I
I
understand that.
understand, yeah.
Sure. But that doesn't make it right, and that's the problem too, man. Is not enough people are doing, what's right is right. And we need to start upholding that, and we've strayed away from that pretty drastically.
If you could put all of this entire incident into one word, what would it be?
Um, uh this is probably going to sound weird, me saying this, but my last few years has really given me a lot of time to think about where I'm at in my life. Um, I would say uh, the word would be blessing. It's a blessing, actually. That seems weird, but I can't I'm in a really, really good spot in my life. I'm unbelievably happy. And, you know, without what had happened, I'd probably still be in, you know. I might be dead. I might have gone on a deployment and gotten shot, you know. And then I'm not, enjoying the lake with my family. I'm not able to play catch with my son every day, which you know, is like one of the highlights of my day. You know, I'm not able to stand at the grill and cook and have a nice drink with my wife and talk about the day, right? So, is what happened shitty? Yes, it's terrible. It's terrible for me. It's terrible for Danny and Josh. It's terrible for Rick Rodriguez's family, right? But at the same time, it's it was a blessing in disguise because I'm where I'm supposed to be in life.
You think you're right now, because you say you're happy, but I want to ask you, do you think you're 100% okay with yourself and with everything that happened that night?
Yeah, I absolutely am.
That's, a lot of people say they're still working through it. I think that it's great that you are at a point where you've come to terms and made peace with all of it, because we could very much say this could eat away at you and destroy you.
Don't get me wrong. Like I said, like those first 2 years battling with the sense of losing purpose and stuff was a struggle. But once, and I had a lot of time to reflect on this. Once I realized and told myself, Eric, your time in special forces, your time as a medic, that does not define you as a person, right? Let it go, dude. Like this, what I did was not the end all be all, right? It's a small glimpse of my life. And you gotta just let it go. My good friend Nick, he got wounded in Iraq, uh, really bad, to where he had to get out. Um,
Who was that?
and Nick
I
Jones,
know Nick.
yeah, me and Nick served together in hotel company on a team for deployment, and
That's an
I love
amazing
Nick to
story.
death.
Nick's story is amazing when he got hurt.
Nick is an unbelievable American, unbelievable Marine, and just a good dude. And he was struggling a lot with the fact that his military career was coming to an end. He knew it, and I made him this chest, right, this wooden chest, and I brought it to him, and I said, "Hey, man, you gotta let it go." And I said, "I made this chest for you." I said, "This is a place for you to put all your special things in from the military, and it's for you and for you alone. And so, like, put it all in here, man. And then when you need to, you come back to it and you look at it and reflect. But then when you're done, you close the lid and you put it away and you live your life, right?" So yeah, you just gotta. Once I was able to break through that barrier and realize there's more than just my career and what I did and all the cool guy shit or whatever you want to call it, right? Um, I was at peace with that, right? I got to do it. I got the T-shirt. Met some great people, guys I'll never forget. My brothers that I still talk to, but it's over. Next chapter. Let's move on.
What do you say, for kind of to wrap this whole conversation up? What do you say to the people that supported you through this entire thing and never left your side?
I mean, thank you isn't enough. I mean, it's just it's humbling. I would tell them all I'm humbled that they they didn't have to stick with us. They didn't have to help us out. Guys like Dave Gerfine, the president of UAP, and how they stepped in to support us financially with our legal fees, and our lawyers, our wives, and all of our family and close friends. I mean, they, you know, who they are, right? Like going to like my friends, like the guys that would call you every once in a while. Because I didn't need to call. I didn't want to call every day, right? But the guys that would hit you up like, "Hey, man, thinking about you. you doing okay kind of thing, you know? It's humbling. It's humbling and it's an honor to have people like that in your life.
So what's next, man? We've talked a lot about looking at the lake and grilling and stuff, but what's next for you?
Well, uh, next is improving my golf game. That's probably my biggest. That's probably my biggest. That's the ultimate struggle is the golf game. So, and figuring out my damn driver because I am all over the place with that thing. No, man, it's just continuing to live, man, and like being there more for my kids. I in the past I didn't feel like I spent a lot of time with them, and this year I've made it a point for like my son. He's a great baseball player. He loves playing hockey, and anytime he asks me to play catch, I stop everything I do and I go play catch with him. And even if it's for 5 minutes, because sometimes that's all it is, just 5 minutes. Uh, it means everything. And like I think that doing that can sum up life in just that one instant, right? It's you're in the moment. You're building a connection with somebody. You're appreciating the smaller things in life. It could be playing catch with your kid. It could be letting your baby girl paint your nails. It could be any of those things. For me, my like everything is that, playing catch with my son. And that's what's next for me is more of that.
You think this whole situation made you a better person?
Yeah. It
I
did.
guess a question would be, because a better person sounds like a slanted question. A more complete person.
Yeah. I think that's a better way to put it. A more rounded individual. Absolutely. It made me realize what was important, because, shit, man, for 3 years, the thought on your mind every day is, I'm going to, I could lose all of it.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about where people can find you. Social media, websites, wherever.
Well, they can find me on my lake in Michigan. I'm not on any social media, actually. I've actually detached myself from social media. I used to be on Instagram, but I'm not on it anymore. I wasn't in the moment enough. So, no, to be honest, I'm unfindable. I mean, if people did want to reach out to me,
Well, you're not lying though, because it took someone that I knew and knew you to get to you. So
if people want to reach out to me, I am definitely open to telling my story. I'm definitely open to giving people advice. If something, even if it's one person listening to this, that something strikes a chord with them, please reach out to DJ, and DJ, you have permission to share my number and email with them.
all right, guys. Man, Eric, this was an awesome story. We talked about people need to understand that one moment in time does not paint an entire story of a person, and I'm so glad you got to come on here and tell your whole story. It's an amazing one, and like you said, it won't be forgotten. It's in the books now, and it's case law, and it's a super interesting case from all aspects that you look at it. And I'm completely honored that you came on here and told your story.
Well, yeah, DJ, thanks for having me, man. I've really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed our talks, beforehand, getting to know you and being able to really go in depth with some of that stuff that I sent you. There's a lot to it. And I know, I kind of brushed over some things, but I think we did a good job of like hitting the high note and then kind of circling back to kind of elaborate a little more because, I could talk all day about this, but, no, man, I've really enjoyed this and I look forward to talking more with you in the future, just as a friend. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it, dude.
All right, guys, you know where you can find Eric, which is nowhere but on the lake. So you can get in contact with me, let's talk about where you can find me, because I am on social media to provide an outlet for this show. So let's talk about it. You can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast. You can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations, they're in video form. But your one-stop shop, dtdpodcast.net. That's where you're going to find everything that's going on with the show and everything that's going to be happening with the show. As always, if you like this content, share, like, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, all of those different things. Make sure you go check us out. We're trying to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and we're on our way to doing it. So make sure you hit that button and let us know what you're thinking about the show. Finally, let's talk about the guy that makes this happen, my buddy Hoot over at Nomadic Research, nomadicresearch.com. I'm telling you, if you just want to be a cool guy and wear cool clothes and have cool packs, these are the ones that you need to get a hold of. They have hats, shirts, hoodies, bags that I talk about, but let's talk about some of the things that are coming up with them. They have their own podcast now. It's the Nomadic Research Podcast. You can learn about them, learn about their history, and learn about what they're doing with the show. Make sure you go check them out, nomadicresearch.com. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. That's Eric. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.